Faraway Paladin, Volume 2, The Archer of Beastwoods. This book has the very important job of answering the reader's two main questions. Is the story still interesting now that William has left the City of the Dead? And number 2, are the characters that replace William, Mary and Gus able to fill their shoes? The expectations were set high in Volume 1 as the story starts off with our protagonist fighting and defeating a literal god. Usually series slowly ramp up to those kinds of fights, not start with them, and it's unfortunate but many anime, manga and light novels start off with a very interesting premise and then have trouble finding their footing after the initial plot thread has more or less been resolved. For example, Promised Neverland and Shield Hero, although the latter was never good, but anyway. First, let's start off, as usual, taking a look at the cover. This cover is more focused, featuring only 2 characters, which is ironic seeing as this book has a way bigger cast, but oh well. Right away, I like this one way more than the first one. Instead of those strong shades of red and orange just muddying everything, you have a nice contrast between the green of the Beastwoods, the paler white of Meneldor and the stronger red of William. They both look good on the cover, with William having this more calm, introspective expression and Meneldor this more icy, distant look and this very beautiful appearance, almost a bit feminine, I would say, as was also referenced by William during the book. The characters fit the novel and it's overall more visually appealing, so this cover gets a thumbs up from me. Once again, you also get these foldable pages, although these ones are nowhere near as interesting. They should have had character designs for Bee, Meneldor, Tonio and Reystov, and it seems like a very big missed opportunity that they didn't. All of these characters still get some nice black and white art throughout the book, but still I would have liked to see some initial character designs as we saw in the first volume. Now, let's break down The Archer of Beastwoods. Much to my surprise, this book is actually smaller than the first volume, although in the Japanese version this one is apparently 3 pages longer according to Wikipedia. Don't ask me how that works. The difference in size is strange as this book feels a lot bigger. We meet more characters, we travel through more places, and overall Volume 2 is a much more eventful book as many more things happen. The author had a very interesting approach of packing what feel like 3 short stories into this volume, which makes it so that the stories build on top of each other, but the pacing feels a little bit too fast at times, with one character in particular feeling a bit underwhelming. I find it funny that perhaps the expectation for this book would be for a slower narrative, now that William and the reader are exploring the outside world, so there's a ton of exposition to do, but instead we get non-stop action. I would say that this book is divided into 3 acts. Act 1, Meneldor and the Beastwoods, Act 2, White Sails and the Wyvern, and Act 3, The Purging of the Demons. I want to make it very clear that I enjoyed this book. I love the world and the characters. However, it felt a bit rushed at times. I think that if we only used the first 2 acts and expanded upon them, we would have had a much stronger, more cohesive narrative. The first 2 acts slowly build up William as this man of virtue in a civilization and society that desperately need him, culminating in him defeating the Wyvern and proving not only his virtue but also his might, and being knighted and becoming a proper paladin. William getting knighted is a great high point and feels like the perfect moment to end the book. Reading this, it's like the author wrote a nice book but then looked at the page count and decided to add one more adventure. And I'm conflicted saying this because I did enjoy Act 3, however, it feels awkwardly placed in this book, like the book ended and then for some reason it just kept going. Personally, I think there was a lot of room here for more dialogue scenes with the villagers of Beastwoods, with the people of White Sails, and with the named characters that I enjoyed so much and yet got so little of. Do you agree that this book would have done enough with Acts 1 and 2, or do you think Act 3 was necessary? Leave it in the comments below. There's a certain excitement reading the first few chapters. For all we know, there's no people left anymore, and this is a post-apocalyptic world where William just goes around purging demons and zombies. William quickly finds out that there are other people in this world, but he doesn't really fit in, starting off with where he came from. The South? Brother, there is no South. This is as South as it gets. Mankind's frontier. You're in the Beastwoods of Southmark. And secondly, with the passage of time, geography has changed, but so has humanity. William is seen as this peculiar relic of the past, with his old religious customs that shock even Bishop Bagley, his ability to speak Old Elvish, which leaves Menel surprised, and even his old antiquated speech, which is noticed by a lot of the characters. Gus, Mary and Blood did give him a good education, but so many years have passed ever since they were living that some of their teachings have now become outdated. I really like the running gag where every character tries to guess what is William's backstory, and every one of them makes some outrageous claim that is still more believable than him being raised by 3 benevolent undead. William's strange upbringing is still very useful though, and one of the things I like in this volume is how William applies in the real world all of the lessons he was taught by his 3 teachers. From Mary, he learned grace and kindness, which is clear from his interactions with the other characters. Much like Mary, William is also very religious, which is reflected on his relationship with Gracefield, who sees him as so devout that she even sends him visions so that he can enact her will. From Blood, he learned to fight, which he does a lot of, and very successfully, I might add. One of the funniest scenes in this book is where he's having trouble with the wyvern, and suddenly he remembers Blood's famous words, "Why fancy plan when big muscle do trick?" And from Gus, he learned magic, but more important than that, he learned the value of money, which to me is one of the funniest scenes in the book also, where William just bribes the people to de-escalate the situation. It's clear that even in this fantasy world, he quickly learns that the easiest way to solve most of your problems is to just throw money at them. Jokes aside, I enjoyed one of his monologues where he realizes the meaning of Gus's words, that money is as useful as magic, as he sees the results in the improvement of the Beastwoods villages with the help of his financing. One thing that William also realizes in this book is how absurdly overpowered he truly is. In the scene with Duke Ethelbald Rex Fertile, which, by the way, what a name. I know that Fertile is the name of the kingdom, but it's just such a ridiculous name for a monarch, it just made me laugh. The scene with the esteemed Duke was funny because he assumed there was an entire party that defeated the Wyvern, but instead it was just William with a little bit of help from Menel, and it really puts into perspective how strong William is. In video games, broadly speaking, there's usually 2 types of overpowered characters. The first is the character whose stats are way too overtuned, so he deals way too much damage and takes way too little damage. And second is the character that is way too versatile, so he can do too much, breaking the balance of the game. William G. Merryblood is somehow both overpowered types at the same time. My man is great at close combat, with a spear, with a sword, with his bare hands, with his judo moves, doing a headlock throw on a wyvern. How does that even work? I knew that this happened because I watched season 1 of the anime and I was still hyped. He can use magic, he can use benediction, he can use counter magic. He shows that he also knows invisibility magic, so apparently he can also be stealthy. Oh, and before I forget, he also seems to be immune to poison. So, according to my calculations, that makes William a very simple warrior, sorcerer, priest, rogue. The guy just went into the character creation screen, went into choose class and picked all of the above. William himself has a hard time handling how much stronger he is from the average person. After they fail against the Chimera, he has issues trusting his teammates, feeling like the burden is on himself to save the day, until he has a confrontation with Menel. I like that even in his ego trip, William is still very kind-hearted, wanting to shoulder the burden by himself, but thankfully Menel literally kicked some sense into him. In those fights we see that William, although very strong, cannot just simply solo everything, and a character like Menel, even if individually much weaker than William, is still very capable and very useful in these party scenarios. In Volume 1, yes, technically speaking, William did beat a god, but there were many once-in-a-lifetime conditions met in that book, and he had quite a bit of help from both his parents and even gods, so I like that he is gathering allies and influence for the eventual Round 2 with Mr. Stagnate. While I would prefer Act 3 to have its own book, it's very important for William's character, and also shows that William, while overpowered, is not unbeatable. In the first volume, I spoke about this theme of redemption, of how William lived an empty life previously and now wants to live fully and properly, and this theme continues here right from the first pages. If I'd spent the winter at that cozy temple waiting for spring, I'd have wanted to stay forever, so I couldn't hesitate. I had to believe in myself and step forward. It's very important for William to live this life fully and not repeat the same mistakes, and the demonic sword Overeater is also a metaphor for this. Overeater is a very strong weapon, but it also represents his previous life of numbing himself down, not caring about his own well-being, and disregarding responsibilities. It was a great narrative detail that William decided to finish off the final fight using Pale Moon and not Overeater. Even if the other characters perceive William as this saintly knight with almost godly virtue, we can see through his intimate internal dialogues that this is not true. He is very far from the finished product. I particularly like the scene where he admitted that his biggest fear was being alone again. So I really like this balance of William the mighty paladin and William the normal human who's just enjoying life and gets giddy at simple things like a bathhouse. Of course, the Japanese light novel will have a reference to a bathhouse, it just has to happen. William may have shown a lot of emotional introspection, but he also exemplifies that intelligence is a circle, when sometimes you are so oblivious that you make some 900 IQ moves, where the book ended in a very comedic fashion because William unknowingly made a very smart and big political play, which would make even Ainz very proud. Now, as for the supporting cast, I really enjoyed our sexy tsundere elf, Manel. He was a great partner for William. William is sometimes too naive and very eager to help, and Manel is more down to earth and has more street smarts, and he always says what he means and isn't afraid of being rude about it, so they're a very good mix of hot and cold. The duo complements each other, with William helping Manel's more human side and Manel helping William make the tough decisions. Manel is also very strong-willed himself, although in a different way from William. He has a very strong mental resilience. I especially love that scene where he was having some emotional problem and immediately bounced back even before William could somehow cheer him up. In the words of Manel, if you're dealing with a problem in your life, just remember: sucks, but gotta move on. This guy could be a life coach. There's a deep sense of kinship between Manel and William as they both don't fit in. William because of his upbringing and Manel because he's a half-elf. Even if he doesn't say it out loud, Manel deeply cares for William, even being willing to risk his life against the Duke Rex Fertile. I also loved Bishop Bagley. His philosophy is very unusual but has a certain logic to it. Once you get to know him, he is very pious and very devoted to his own principles. I initially cringed when I saw this character because I thought, oh, here comes the evil priest stereotype, but then he pleasantly surprised me. Definitely one of the more interesting tertiary characters that I've read. Besides Manel, who shares his spotlight with William in this book, the other characters felt a bit underutilized. I would have liked to see more from Bagley, Bee and Tonio. These characters had more potential. And Reystov the Penetrator is to me the biggest miss, as he feels like the biggest sacrifice from Volume 2's fast pacing. I wanted to see Reystov the Penetrator actually penetrate things. He's introduced as this cool, battle-hungry adventurer that is just the right kind of crazy, and despite the cool name and intro, he's just kind of there. He steals the glory in the final fight in a move that feels too last minute, almost like, hey, remember me? I exist. Despite the character having potential, I can't say that he was very well written, as he just wasn't really written. He didn't do much. He was there in the battles against the demons, but he never really had any memorable dialogue or fight scenes, so Volume 2 was Manel and William's book, and I do hope that he has a bigger role in future volumes. So I'm conflicted when talking about The Archer of Beastwoods. On one hand, I think this is a very good read. I enjoy the characters, the world and the story. If anything, this volume is the opposite of boring, as many things happen. But on the other hand, this book feels like it's trying to do too much in the same volume. The confrontation between William and Manel, for example, could have had a bigger setup, and I wanted to see more from the supporting cast. A lot of events were off-screened, and I would have liked to see some spicy point of views from different characters that were underutilized, especially of how they perceive William. I think that would greatly enhance the story. Overall, I enjoyed The Archer of Beastwoods, but as I said, I think there was enough material here for 2 volumes. This was it for me today, folks, and see you on the next video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and ciao! Who sees him as so devout that she even sends him visions so that he can enact her will. Devout? Is that a word? Is devout a word? Is devout a word? Devout, meaning having or showing deep religious feeling or commitment. It is a word. Yay, I know all the words.